Hi, and welcome to Automation in the New Normal, rapid onboarding and offboarding of workers anywhere and on any device, an HMG Strategy webinar powered by Okta. I'm Tom Hoffman, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker today is Gurinder, Bhatti, Senior Solutions Engineer at Okta. Gurinder, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Tom, thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Before we dive into the discussion, I wanted to go into a little bit of context around the topic and share the highlights of our agenda today. We're truly living in an age where the promise of automation is coming to fruition. Whether it's identifying use cases for automating repetitive tasks on a factory floor, to identifying and responding quickly to network anomalies that could represent potential cyber threats, the opportunity for applying cognitive technologies to streamline operational efficiencies and strengthen productivity are just simply enormous. So today we'll be exploring fresh opportunities to automate and improve employee onboarding and offboarding activities. In today's event, we'll explore why it makes sense to automate aspects of employee onboarding and offboarding, and the benefits this can generate both for employees and for hiring managers. We'll also examine why and how to create a source of truth from multiple directories and drive identity lifecycles from your HRIS, granting the right access automatically as employees join and securely removing access in a timely manner as employees leave. We'll also share recommendations to centralize and automate lifecycle management across all apps on premises and in the cloud. We'll discuss effective ways to generate and export detailed reports on who has access to what. And finally, we'll explore examples of companies that have succeeded in automating their onboarding and offboarding of employees, along with the benefits that they've achieved. This will be followed by a Q&A with Gurinder and myself. We'd like to make this as interactive as possible, so please share your questions with us throughout the discussion using the Q&A icon, and we'll respond to questions as we go. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Gurinder to share his initial thoughts on the topic. Gurinder, welcome.
Hey, thank you, and thank you everybody for joining. And as Tom kind of alluded to, it's an age and I guess environment that we're living in now that's kind of forcing us to sort of adapt and come up with these new solutions for a lot of use cases that we necessarily weren't ready for, but we kind of have to accelerate that, right? So let me start sharing my screen and we get into the presentation of for today's session. Tom, just give me a thumbs up if you can see my presentation screen. All right, one more time. I'm going to do something real quick. There you go. Okay, great. So again, like Tom said, I'm Gurinder. I'm a solutions engineer at Okta, and I want to lay out the framework for today's discussion, which is automation in this new normal. So, while organizations have started to get more comfortable and are, adapting to the circumstances around, coronavirus, they're still facing challenges that, may not necessarily be observed on the surface. And, some background here, from a recent employee sentiment survey, while a lot of organizations have been, positively surprised with how they have either maintained productivity or even increased it as this shift to remote work's taken place. It's not on all aspects. Particularly when it comes to collaborative tasks, there is a drop-off. So as you can see, right, there's a lot of challenges with this new working model. For many organizations, this shift requires a new set of tools to be deployed, whether it's video conferencing software or just other collaboration software. But at the same time, right, the requirement for existing tool sets, which could have been on-prem, hasn't gone away. So organizations need to deal with providing that productivity suite, which was originally architected for an on-network workforce, but to a remote workforce now. And Another challenge is BYOD. So as this shift to remote work has been, so immediate and kind of, very quick actually, some employees may not have been equipped with those company devices. And the above is partially contributing to a rise in cybersecurity attacks. So users may not be, using company hardened devices, and they're also not necessarily operating inside that traditional defined network perimeter. Now, equally important is this last point, which kind of emphasizes the need to maintain consistency for our end users as we're trying to, kind of really sort out how this is all going to look like in the future. So what we as organizational leaders are attempting to do is achieve a balance of efficiencies within productivity and IT security, right? For IT teams, they need to be able to have agility and be able to provide that agility for maintaining current state, but also for thriving in this environment. And for those security teams, they need to ensure that proper protections are provided for their user base and that risk is mitigated as much as possible. So today's agenda is going to be around solving this provisioning problem through automation to drive those efficiencies that I talked about, and at the same time, raise that security posture. But before that, I'll give a brief background on Okta, and we'll look at how we can leverage identity to map an enablement strategy for your distributed workforce. So quick background on Okta, right? Who we are, why we're talking about securely implementing identity solutions in this new age. Some of you guys might not be familiar, but for those who aren't, right, Okta is the leader in identity and access management security. We're a cloud-native multi-tenant platform. We have over 8,000 customers globally and in all verticals. And over 125 million daily authentications go through the Okta service. And along with authentication, we're providing a variety of services that enable businesses to achieve efficiencies by streamlining their resource access workflows. And at Okta, our mission's always been to enable any organization to use any technology. And this is because, we see the role of identity and access management sort of as that connective tissue between the end users, the devices they're on, and the applications and resources that they're consuming. So what does that look like from a service offering perspective, right? So we essentially break down identity and access management into two core use cases. What you see on the desktop on the right here is what's called workforce identity. So employees, contractors, partners who need a streamlined way of logging in to do their job. And you can see that there's a central dashboard that users kind of, are dropped onto after they authenticate to Okta. And from there, they have a one-click access to all the resources that are assigned to them. On the left-hand side, you have customer identity. So applying that same secure and intuitive authentication and access experience to your consumers. Now, if or when you're logging into, let's say, JetBlue or, MLB.com, you're doing this with Okta on the back end, championing this connectivity and authentication and user experience. And finally, we're committed to doing all this as securely as possible, right? Because we value security, and it is a top priority, especially, in a climate like this where majority of the users are remote, right? So having that remote user workforce access resources that they're typically and traditionally, used to accessing on premise, and those resources are traditionally being protected in that corporate environment. You can see why that security becomes even more of an issue and a crucial gap you need to close. So we're committed to helping organizations sort of get on their way or go forward in their journey towards that zero trust posture. This is sort of an obligatory slide here, but I want to just emphasize here that Okta is the leader in identity and access management. We've been doing this for quite a while now, and have been leading the pack for a handful of years as well. We offer an independent and neutral platform for workforce identity, a scalable and secure customer identity platform, and overall an identity-centric approach to zero trust security. So, taking this back to what this talk is kind of focusing on, right? One of the key challenges is properly administering the joiner, mover, leaver processes in an organization. And this goes back to sort of, my earlier point around the climate that we're in, which kind of means that there's no, uniform ecosystem to lean on, right? And lifecycle management at all organizations is filled with a lot of challenges. First, there's a proliferation of users. So, you have your different users, they're on different devices and accessing different applications, but all that needs to be connected. And, different users like, let's say employees versus contractors may have different life cycles as well. And second, decision-making isn't contained within IT. You have business app owners, you have line of business leaders, and even partners who want to sort of decide who gets access to what and for how long, right? And third, with legacy identity management solutions, you're not able to handle today's cloud challenges. Now, whether those challenges are around efficiencies, whether they're around having to deal with the demand for more of an agile industry, or even the demand for these modern threats, traditional solutions, they just can't cut it because they can't necessarily have the contextual data that a modern solution would have. So if you, drill down into the technical details of lifecycle management, you quickly find out that onboarding and offboarding users is complex, right? And here we're using the joiner, mover, leaver process to describe the steps in managing user lifecycles, right? In the joiner phase, a user gets created in a source system, and that could be a lot of things. It could be your HR systems, your directories, multiple directories for multiple domains, or even a self-created account, right, through a self-service registration. And in the joiner phase, you want to automate granting birthright access as much as possible. And birthright is those applications that you should get on day one, right? So things like email, storage, payroll, or even your ticketing systems. And when you go from there to the mover phase, now in the mover phase, things get kind of complicated because you need to account for all sorts of different scenarios. So, promotions or job changes, right? Absence of leave of absence due to something like, FMLA, or even, something like a life event, which forces maybe a name change or last name change. All that stuff needs to be accounted for. And the trick here is that, every organization has their own policies, how to deal with those things. So that makes a cookie cutter approach very difficult. And finally, in the leaver phase, how are you handling that leave, right? That leave event. Is it immediate or scheduled? Does the terminated user lose all their access at once? Or, should you retain a time-bound access to, something like ADP or your payroll system? So, at the end of the year, the user is able to, print out their W-2s or something. Again, every organization is going to have their own policies and guidelines for this stuff. And that's what, makes lifecycle management kind of challenging. Now, if we look at a common onboarding scenario to, understand where things break down, at a lot of organizations, the HR department is the authoritative, source of truth, because they're the first ones to record a new hire event. And they're the first ones to record when an employee has been terminated, right? So it kind of makes sense for IT to drive their actions like provisioning applications or assignments from HR signals. Now, the problem with that is HR commonly notifies IT about onboarding and offboarding events in manual ways, right? Whether it's through filing a ticket, sending an email, maybe it's a FTP or SFTP server that's set up. Or even, in some cases, you might have a CSV on a thumb drive that gets carried away. So as you can see, right, all this is, of course, manual, but it's also disconnected and it's also unsynchronized. And because of all that, right, there's pain associated with all those things, right? Obviously, manually provisioning accounts, it's not only inefficient, but it's also error prone. And when these error-prone processes are used to assign access to applications, that can result in security issues. Because I think it's very important to understand that you rather have somebody not get access because they were not assigned properly than have somebody get access that they should not have, right? So that's a very important thing from a security use case, that you want to not have to worry about, and you do have to worry about that when you have something that's manual and operational there. And additionally, you know, when you think about this, the pain is only getting larger as your organization is growing, or an event like coronavirus happens where you have this influx of responsibility that, you know, requires immediate turnaround time, right? And this manual process is going to obviously overburden your IT teams and your HR teams, because, you know, if you're, again, you know, going back to this drastic shift, right? If you were before onboarding, you know, a few employees with just a couple of applications every week, you can scale, right? And you can, you know, try to double check and triple check that work. But as you have to onboard, you know, everybody at once, or you have to enable, you know, a whole team or department or a region at once for something, it's not scalable. So that pain does become unbearable, and you know, it leaves the door open for a lot of the errors and the security that I brought about, right? And finally, you know, when you talk about loss of productivity and friction, right, it's not just for your IT teams and your HR teams. The processes are affecting your end users as well, who can't, you know, necessarily get to their work if the resources and applications aren't provisioned in a timely fashion. So, one second. Let's talk about lifecycle management and provisioning problems, right? Striving towards an automated implementation of this process. And we can tackle that through these 4 stages. You have a single source of truth, automated user lifecycle management, application connectors, and eventually, you know, visibility and reporting into all that. So, you know, the first thing that you want to do is reconcile your user stores and consolidate your identities. By leveraging Okta's universal directory, which you can think of as a meta directory in the cloud, you're able to centrally administer identity and access management controls to your end users. And the benefit of Okta's cloud-native universal directory is that, you know, it can house identities from various systems, right? Whether you're mastering from Active Directory, or let's say it's multiple Active Directories across multiple domains, whether it's an LDAP database, or, you know, it's through a self-service registration flow. Or even, you know, directly from an HRIS application like UltiPro or Workday or SAP, just to name a few. You know, Okta can connect to all those sources and bring those users in. So, you know, centralizing and consolidating your identities into a single user store where you have, and the user store being cloud native, you know, offers its own set of benefits. And you're able to have that single, you know, pane, admin, you know, pane or single pane of glass. Not just for your access policies, but also your authentication policies as well. Next, we're going to talk about automated user lifecycle, right? So we're going back to that original problem that we looked at, right? That friction and that, you know, perhaps, you know, the ability to have errors and security gaps, right, in that manual process. So Okta's lifecycle management solution is going to aim to automate that entire joiner, remover, leaver process, right? And in this diagram, as you can see, Okta is sitting between your HR systems and your IT teams. And Okta is going to directly talk to your HR application and then provision and deprovision accounts to all the applications on the right-hand side. Mind you, we also have the ability to write those identities into Active Directory as well. So it's not just, you know, your SaaS applications or you know, your consumer-facing applications, right, or your user-facing applications. You can literally go ahead and take your data, be it sourced from HR, and then push that down into Active Directory. But just as easily, right? Let's say you don't have HR system like that's mature enough to be able to do that integration. You can certainly master from multiple Active Directories or a single Active Directory as well. So, you know, Okta's lifecycle management product is, it's really making it easy to again, handle that joiner, mover, leaver process, right? It can handle all types of users and the life cycles that are associated with them and are managed differently, right? For example, if you have an employee's lifecycle may be tightly coupled to an HR system, but a contractor's lifecycle might require policies that are, you know, set as an automatic, automatic execution date, right? So contractors by nature, they usually have a beginning and an end date that their engagement is on or is for, and you can have that, you know, pre-configured in Okta where automatically that account is deactivated, and then the proper downstream flows happen. You can also have access be driven off of users' context, because again, right, the power of universal directory, right, the power to have your end users' profiles and their attributes all consolidated and centralized, and then being able to leverage that information. So things like their department or their region, or maybe their line of business. All those things are information that you can feed into Okta via that sync from your source of truth, and then drive those access and entitlement decisions based off of that, right? So Lifecycles is able to also provide this approval workflow where users can request access, and then the appropriate teams are able to go ahead and grant that access, which will trigger those downstream account creations and provisioning. Again, what we're doing with lifecycle management is we're helping to achieve this vision of customers being able to automate their joiner, mover, leaver processes by sort of building in this hands-free logic and hands-free connectivity all the way from your source of truth all the way to the downstream applications, right? And if you really simplify lifecycle management, it kind of provides two basic things, right? The first is that it's going to offer a prescriptive joiner, mover, leaver path. Simply clicking a checkbox will enable the creates, the updates, and the deactivates on a user's identity. And this is done in conjunction with making it really easy to provision and deprovision accounts in all those downstream applications, along with in Active Directory, like I mentioned earlier. And secondly, from a security perspective, the ability to ensure proper offboarding occurs when a user no longer needs access to a resource is crucial. Again, I referenced this earlier, but the pain of having to worry about or the what can come out, or the outcome of somebody, let's say, being terminated, right? It's one thing, let's say, if a user changes roles, right, and they still have access to an application or resource, because they're still part of your company, they still have to adhere to your code of conduct and all the policies and guidelines you have. It's another thing if the employee has been, let's say, terminated, and they still have access to your company data, to some vital information, your PII information that necessarily they should not have. So that's a bigger task that you would have to handle if that does occur. So having that full assurance around this account is reflected properly in the source of truth, so it's properly reflected in all the downstream applications, and that's vital. So obviously, automation and driving access decisions from a centralized, source of truth, like Okta's Universal Directory, and then automating that downstream lifecycle management of your users with those appropriate downstream assignments is wonderful. It's great because it's going to drive those efficiencies. But you don't want to have to build out those integrations either, right? This entire end-to-end process needs to flow smoothly and seamlessly. So that's where Okta's application connectors come in. Now, you guys, may be familiar, but Okta has this concept of a Okta integration network, and you can think of that as like an app store. And currently, we have, I want to say, close to 6,500 to 7,000 out-of-the-box integrations. With well-known SaaS applications, on-premise applications, solutions, VPNs that are validated, right, from an authentication perspective. But in some cases, what Okta is able to do is we're able to go beyond that basic authentication integration, right, and have that deeper integration. For example, with Workday, we have a deep integration. We're able to pull deeper data from Workday, but we're also able to push deeper data into applications as well. And that's where Okta's lifecycle management comes in, where we have, I want to say, about 300 out-of-the-box connectors that are validated and supported to some of the most common SaaS solutions as well as on-premise applications. And what that does is, again, it makes this whole process seamless, where you're not having to code, you're not having to set up, and you're not having to maintain that connectivity and that integration between your identity solution and that downstream application. And as we're rolling out new integrations constantly, which we are, as new products come out to the market, or even the existing application sets, we're constantly evolving our application catalog to, further, offer deeper integrations and more capabilities around all the applications that we contain in it. Along with that, we've also revamped the user experience, right? Now you can go ahead and search granularly for all the applications and the criteria that you want to search for. So whether you need to look for a CASB, whether it's a VPN, whether you need to look for something that supports lifecycle management. Again, you have this better user experience to be able to get to find the assets that you need. And finally, logging in and reporting, right? That's absolutely crucial, because in an age where IT teams and technology owners, they're facing a lot of questions, both from an internal and external auditor side, right? The ability to trace a user from birthright to, let's say, a role change to an eventual deactivation of their account, it's pivotal in satisfying requirements for auditors. And additionally, from a security perspective, being able to determine, access enablement or account deactivations, the downstream impact of role changes or profile changes, it can significantly aid in, things like incident response activities, help desk troubleshooting, or even, generating metrics for adoption and usage of the platform, right? So it's critical to have a system that can give you that data and insight that then you can pull. And by the way, all these access requests and all these events that happen in Okta can absolutely be ported and pulled to a on-prem or cloud SIM like a Splunk or QRadar and all those. So we talked about lifecycle management and the efficiencies and all the things that it provides, right, from a joiner, mover, leaver process. But while that is valuable objective to strive for, right, there are organizations who maybe have already gone down that journey. There are organizations who are somewhat mature in their implementation of their lifecycle management activities. And their users do interact with the systems in that perspective, but perhaps there's a use case where there requires a deeper level integration beyond just what lifecycle management gives you, right? So increasingly, what we're seeing in our customer base is that our customers want more flexibility to handle more of their provisioning needs. In some cases, customers need to build bespoke workflows to handle unique business processes. They need to add logic, add timing, add multiple actions, let's say, to their joiner, mover, leaver processes. And in other cases, customers simply need to do more with an application. So as you can see here, right, for example, this Box integration that we have. So in addition to provisioning a base account in Box, which obviously lifecycle management can achieve, your IT teams may need to also set entitlements, set folder shares, which are, again, app-specific actions, right? So that's a deeper level integration and deep level of communication between the IAM system and the downstream application that we're seeing in the industry customers are asking for. So to that, right, our answer is Okta Workflows. Okta Workflows was GA'd earlier this year at our Octane event, and it enables customers to build identity-centric, business processes without code, right? So it's low code to no code solution. And the way it works is that, workflows starts with a trigger or an event, and it could be a lot of things, right? In some cases, maybe a newly created user should trigger a flow. And in other cases, maybe moving a user from one group to another group is going to trigger that flow. Or perhaps it's assigning a user to an application that will start and cause that trigger to occur. So you have this trigger and something's kicked it off. And next, what you want to do is you might want to run some kind of logic around that, like an if this, then that kind of function, right? So if something happens here after this trigger has been executed, then take this action. And next, maybe I want to have a deeper action on an application. So we talked about entitlements in Box, or maybe it's assigning a territory to a user in Salesforce. And then finally, I can chain applications, to one another, right? And have that whole process be streamlined. And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm adding a user to a sales channel and then sending a welcome message. So as you can see, right, you have all these applications that may not necessarily have anything to do with each other in the terms of, their actual technical, connectivity and their need to communicate with each other now, how they currently have been set up in your environment. But you can use workflows to build that relationship, to build that business logic and that IT process. So, out of the box, the workflows product it's got, templates or pre-built flows that you can either use directly or you can modify to suit your needs. It's also got pre-built connectors, right, which are different from the lifecycle management connectors. And the cool thing with this is, and kind of like how we're doing with the rest of the Okta integration network is, we're building more and more of these connectors, right? So you'll keep seeing more connections around workflow connectors grow with a broader set of both on-premise and SaaS solutions and SaaS services. And what these connectors do in workflows is they expose more of an application's API capabilities, right? So more than your standard create, update, and deactivate actions on a user's identity. And finally, like I said before, workflows is embracing a no-code approach to building these flows. One of the value propositions around this is that you don't necessarily need to have a dedicated developer or a dedicated, application SME, right, to be able to facilitate a lot of this and implement a lot of this. And secondly, you don't have to worry about, sort of that tribal knowledge aspect of things, right, where if that person leaves and nobody knows how something was set up, right? This is very visual, this is very intuitive, and it's very straightforward in terms of building that logic out, because again, it kind of goes step by step and sort of guides you into what you need to do. So to wrap this presentation up again, while this shift to modern enterprise was already in play, while the cloud adoption, the desire to automate and achieve efficiencies, has been a journey that most organizations were already on, right? I think this new normal, what it did is simply accelerated the timelines, right? So not only is it a value proposition to do all these activities that I talked about and we all went through, but you almost get a sense that you'd be left behind if you don't, right? You're missing a piece of the equation if you're not doing some of these things. The speed at which IT teams and businesses and business teams are needing to move is ever accelerating, right? And on top of that, you add to that the fact that remote workforce is bringing with it its own set of new challenges, right? Whether again they're regarding quicker turnaround time, better efficiency and productivity demanded from your workforce, or even more importantly, the security challenge, right, of having a remote user and having to sort of trust them to be in a secure state to access your crown jewels, your corporate data. This is very, it's kind of necessary that we take these steps to automate, right? So automation is going to shore up and strengthen that security framework and push the organization towards that eventual, zero trust state that everybody's trying to get to. And, again, lifecycle management, it's greatly helping to, tie the access and security aspects of the user enablement equation. And when you add the automation angle of it, you really start to not only, again, up-level that security posture, but you also start to realize the efficiencies and the increase in productivity. So with that, I obviously want to, encourage you guys to, contact us, learn a little bit more about workflows and lifecycle management and overall what Okta offers in general. If you have any questions, please, hit me up on LinkedIn or get in touch with us. And I want to thank you for your time. So Tom, I'm going to hand it off to you.
That's great, Gurinder. Terrific setup for our discussion today. And by the way, I really like what you shared about the challenges that organizations are facing with the remote workplace at this point. Given the difficulties of trying to onboard new employees as we work remotely, because clearly this is a challenge not only now but for the foreseeable future. So really appreciate everything you've shared with us so far.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So maybe as a starting point, can you share with us a little bit about yourself and your role at Okta, a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a security specialist on the solutions and engineering team at Okta. I'm out of New York City. And I've been in the security space for a very long time, right? Having worked in mostly fintech for the better part of 2 decades. And, what I kind of seen is it kind of, matured with the industry, right? Having sort of a legacy background and going from, hardware security controls and network security controls to eventually, where we are now, where you're looking at this whole concept of zero trust, and you're looking at this concept of, deperimeterized, workforce, right? So identity being that critical piece of the equation, and the data and the resources. So again, very cybersecurity focused, and I work in I work with a lot of customers, right? Whether they're small, big, different industries, and we've seen a lot of things around how they're making their shift towards a zero trust model there.
Very interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, why is this such an ideal time to automate onboarding and offboarding activities? What are some of the trends and factors that are playing into this?
I think it's somewhat a blessing in disguise, because it's an aspect of IT administration that's normally one of the last things that departments turn their attention to, right? Normally, and having been on that enterprise side, normally the thought process is often around putting a technology in place to perform the primary function, and then deprioritizing the secondary or post-implementation functions. And then, slowly moving on to next project, because, that's the shiny ball. That's what's more priority. That's what, business and management wants to, turn around and execute on. But because of the shift to remote work and how rapid it was, right? The pain of not automating, right? And the clear benefits of doing so are making it a no-brainer. Organizations see the error-prone activities, the delays in employee onboarding and turnaround time around their requests. So, even from a security perspective, the shield of the corporate network no longer being there, right? So all that is accelerating this move towards automation and streamlining the entire process, which again, gives you that closure around those security gaps and the manual operation that you had to do.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, earlier in your presentation, you talked about some of the benefits of automating onboarding and offboarding activities from the organizational standpoint. What are some of the benefits for employees themselves?
Yeah, I think predominantly they're from I'll get to offboarding, but predominantly from an onboarding perspective, right? As an employee, a new employee at that, right? And we've all been there. You spend the first week, trying to figure out how to put in tickets. You spend the second week getting them approved, right? And by the time you're ready to go, you have a mountain of work waiting for you, because, guess what? You were added to those email distribution lists from day one. So you have been getting those responsibilities and tasks, but you just haven't had the access to resources to work on them, right? So having that access, that you should from day one, and we talk about that birthright application concept and things, right? It helps your overall experience, right? Because you're immediately enabled, and you're able to start contributing and being productive as well. From an offboarding perspective, I think the brunt of the responsibility falls on the teams, right? Security, operations, and HR. You as an employee may be asked at times to perhaps deactivate or turn over your credentials to applications and systems, and maybe provide a attestation that you have done so, right? And if that was all automated, right, it kind of helps the employee from that side. But I think predominantly the effects and the benefits are from an employee onboarding standpoint.
Terrific, thanks. Can you also share some additional benefits of automating onboarding and offboarding for both hiring managers and HR teams?
Right, sure. And like I said in the presentation, right, in ensuring a smooth onboarding experience for a user, it goes a long way. From not having to provide a user the tools they need day one, but also, not having to deal with perhaps incorrect downstream assignments, right? And that were, maybe done manually, or having to confirm, some other team's actions. It's going to save your HR teams, which again is a system of record, or even a hiring manager who kind of knows what the accesses new employees should get. It's going to save them some serious time, right? And then from a offboarding perspective, right, having the assurance that a single activity like a deactivation of an account in the HR system is going to trigger that entire downstream deactivation flow. It's a tremendous value add for achieving efficiency. I've been there multiple times where, accounts and access to downstream applications and resources was still active well beyond the employee's termination date. And a lot of it had to do with either the HR data not getting to the operations teams, or maybe the operations teams making a mistake, right? Acting on maybe perhaps the wrong account, or just dropping the ball there. So you can see all the legwork that somebody would need to do to sort of rectify that, and then ensure that everything is proper, and then filling out the proper, post-incident reports and such. So it's a big headache.
Sure. And that's, that raises some serious security implications too, whether it involves a former employee that may try to access systems when they shouldn't be, or a hacker that tries to assume their identity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So at this point, we'd like to get a sense of where our attendees are at in terms of their maturity levels. Can we pull up the pop-up survey that we have teed up? So what stage maturity level are you at right now in automating some of your onboarding and offboarding activities? You're just starting to explore? We've just begun piloting automation in a few areas to test it out. We flipped the switch on automating a few of our onboarding and offboarding activities, but are still considering additional opportunities. Or our organization is fairly mature in our automation journey for onboarding and offboarding. So interesting response rates so far. Gurinder, from what you're seeing here, how does this map with what you're discussing with clients and prospective clients?
Yeah, I think this kind of falls in line with that, right? Again, a lot of what's coming down the pike is sort of almost forced on us, right? Because we're having to face these hurdles we necessarily didn't face before. So, a lot of organizations were maybe in the exploratory phase or had other priorities. But now they're seeing that this has become a priority. So that's why you see a lot of organizations are starting to tackle that lifecycle management a piece of the user's enablement. So I think this is falling in line with that. I think the other aspect of it is, as organizations are implementing it, they are, because of the environment and Corona and the whole remote workforce, they're starting to come up with newer use cases, right? So they might have had an implementation, but now they have these use cases they didn't have before. So they need to a solution for those as well.
Very good, thanks. So let's shift the discussion a little bit. Automation offers companies an opportunity to improve upon existing processes and either make them better or more efficient. So Gurinder, from your standpoint, what are some of the recommendations for leveraging automation to create a single source of truth from multiple directories and drive identity lifecycles from HRIS systems?
Correct, right. And as you and the audience, right, saw in the presentation, the initial act of consolidation of identities into a single solution is that first step to starting the automation journey, right? Of course, HRIS can be that system, but in some cases, right, it doesn't drive lifecycle management activities. Furthermore, there are cases where HRIS may not have all the user data. So if you think about it, right, often email addresses are created after the mailbox has been set up, right? And that's well after the user's HR data has been populated. And then once that email address is set up, right, that data may not necessarily go back into that HR system. So, I think it's a combination of first identifying all the user stores, all the places where you need to obtain your data from, and then being able to have and bring that into a central directory or central repository like Okta's cloud native universal directory. It's a must, and I think it's probably the first step you need to take when it comes to starting your automation journey, especially around IAM.
Great advice, thanks. So I just want to remind the attendees to, if you have any questions that you'd like to share with Gurinder or myself, please enter them now. You can click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your console, type in your question, and then hit submit. So in the meantime, Gurinder, how can these approaches enable HR leaders to grant the right access automatically as employees join and then securely remove access when needed in a timely manner?
So this concept of birthright applications, right? When we talk about resource assignment, majority of the application stack is common, right, to the majority of the employees. So the intent should be to get that low-hanging fruit, right? If all my employees, regardless of title, location, etc., is going to need a payroll app, right? A ticketing app, an email application, maybe a collaboration app as well. Especially with today's time, Zoom. Tell me, somebody who doesn't have Zoom has a signed app to them, right? So there's no reason that those can't be provided from the onset, right? And furthermore, as users are leaving the company and as user identity that was sourced from the HR system is properly reflected there, it's going to properly trigger those downstream deactivations in Okta and then those downstream deactivations in the applications. So, HR leaders have this ability to drive efficiency and productivity through automation because, again, they're serving as that central source of truth to drive these assignments and de-assignments.
Right. So, along those lines too, I'd imagine that many of the attendees have a mix of both cloud and on-premises environments that they're managing. Can you share with us some recommendations for centralizing and automating lifecycle management across both on-premises apps and those in the cloud?
Yeah, I think first it's important to get buy-in from all stakeholders, right? Ensuring proper communication so that everybody from HR to IT to operations is aware of the objective, it's aware of the necessary tasks and the outcome and the value proposition, right? Secondly, understanding your data is crucial. Understanding all the data stores is crucial. Once you have, I think, identified those, right, you can begin the work to consolidate and centralize administration of that data and of those identities.
Got it. Thanks. So, we haven't really gotten into this aspect of it, but, change of any kind represents a cultural shift for people. Can you share with us some cultural considerations when considering automation? What advice would you offer there?
Yeah, so, just like I just mentioned, right, it's extremely important to have that buy-in from all your stakeholders, right? You need to understand that regardless of how little intervention or a role a specific department plays in your solution or solutioning of an automation process, you still need to communicate to them because there may be something that you're not seeing which does greatly impact them, right? So a lot of times, they're able to offer, certain, tidbits or certain things that you don't have visibility into, especially HR, right? In terms of how often do they get that data? How often do they consolidate it? Is there a way that they synchronize from multiple stores? Do they do any kind of, attribute transformation on their end that you need to wait for it to occur before you synchronize and pull that data in? So a lot of these things, we from the IT side may not think about, but you absolutely need to make sure that everybody who's involved in this process is aware of everything that's going to happen, right? And secondly, it's always important to communicate to your end users and to your support teams of what to expect, especially if that change, if there's a change in the user experience, you absolutely need to do a dry run, get feedback, then iterate over that, and then plan your communications and prep your support teams accordingly as well.
Great advice, and it also underscores the criticality of really understanding the onboarding and offboarding activities that HR teams are involved with.
Yeah, of course.
So, in your experience working with clients, what are the common technical or operational challenges that they encounter when they attempt to automate onboarding or offboarding activities? What can you share with us there?
So I think one of the challenges that customers typically face is around, what I've seen is normally around attribute mapping, right? So you have a scenario where, Okta is, let's say, pulling in your user store from a source of truth. Again, that could be HRIS or Active Directory. And then we're bringing all these attributes in and the entire user profile as well. Now, when you want to provision that and those accounts downstream, the application may require a certain format for some of those attributes, right? The application may require some alteration to the attributes. So we typically see customers struggle with that, that technically. Now, most of the time, right, this is during initial discussions or if they have very limited, exposure to Okta and Universal Directory and its capabilities. And they raise this as a pain point. But for existing customers or people who have been dealing with Okta just from being in that dashboard administration, I think they're smart enough to realize the power of Universal Directory and how it can solve for a lot of these use cases.
Perfect, thanks. So Gurinder, one of the questions that's come in is the following: does Okta handle SAP segregation of duties requirement?
So Okta is not a governance platform, right? What we can do is we're able to go ahead and pull from your, again, source of truth, and we're able to use that to do proper assignment that you dictate in Okta, right? The assignments in Okta are based off of group memberships, and those groups, again, don't necessarily need to be, Active Directory. They can be local groups in Okta that you create. So in order to handle any kind of segregation duty, you would have to, take any attributes that you're bringing in from SAP, and then based on those attributes, assign the users to those appropriate groups. That's going to be able to give you that differentiation between user A and user B.
Thanks for laying that out for us.
Yeah.
So Gurinder, can you also walk us through an example or two of companies that Okta has worked with that have successfully automated onboarding and offboarding activities?
Sure. So I don't know if I can, I don't know if I have any referenceable names, to be honest. I got to check on that, but earlier.
Or by industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I was engaged with the IT services company that's global, and they were in the process of deploying UltiPro as the HR solution to over, I think, 18,000 users. Now, interestingly, they admitted that they did not want to do HRIS as a master, or what we call HR as a master in Okta, right, at that time, because their own internal processes and systems needed to be configured that way. So as a first stage, what they did was what we see traditionally most typical organizations do, which is have UltiPro feed that data into Active Directory. And by the way, they have Active Directory domains in so many different countries globally, right? But we were able to, again, source from multiple Active Directory domains and then provision their users into things like Office 365, ServiceNow, their VPN solution, as well as Slack, right? All fairly seamlessly. Another customer that is a large global retailer, they recently leveraged, Okta workflows and our lifecycle management capabilities to address use cases around, organizational unit mappings in Active Directory, right? So a user perhaps changing organizational units, is not necessarily reflected back in those downstream applications. So being able to leverage Okta to do that was another use case that they were able to solve with it.
Excellent, thanks. So taking more of a forward-looking spin, if you will, what are some of the challenges that Okta is addressing with its lifecycle management products that go beyond traditional onboarding and offboarding capabilities?
So, again, Okta workflows, which I went over, it came to be because of a couple of things, right? One, although the traditional, capabilities of Okta's lifecycle management connectors is very powerful, and it does provide an exceptional value, we saw what could be added to that normal, lifecycle management capability set. And two, the industry, our customers sort of demanded it, right? Okta already has access to the user's identity, as well as having access and the ability to monitor application activity. So by leveraging those two things and marrying them, we're able to solve for complex business logic. And these corner cases, around, chaining together actions from different applications and connecting, sales app to the ticketing app and then to the collaboration app. So things like that, they were all, challenges, necessarily challenges, but they were things that customers saw as value propositions, right? So that's where it came from. And the power of workflows is that it's a no-code approach, right, to achieve specific results, and rather than having to write customized code to do that. And the ability to build logic that's multi-staged instead of a simple siloed condition translating to a simple siloed action is really what drives a lot of the value that workflows can deliver.
Excellent, thanks. Gurinder, for organizations that are very early stage in this journey, what's some advice or recommendations you'd offer to them?
Yeah, I think what they should do is, perhaps do an assessment, right, on their enablement practice, right, and see where the gaps and inefficiencies are. Obviously, with this change to a predominantly remote workforce, there's a lot of stuff that's coming to the surface that may have not really been known because, again, everybody was on the environment, everybody's on the network. But now, getting that assessment and understanding how your data is flowing, I think it's a good way to see how mature you are or what kind of state you're in, and then being able to take appropriate actions from there.
Excellent advice. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's been terrific today. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share beyond what you've shared so far?
Just that, again, I encourage everybody to sort of, again, assess that enablement practice, to see those gaps, especially how we're, sort of operating today. And again, the more you can automate, and more importantly, the more you can secure, the more value there is to be realized. Because again, by automating your lifecycle management and that whole joiner, mover, leaver process, you're driving productivity, you're providing capabilities to your IT teams and business teams that they may not have had previously because the complexity of the use cases. So, take a look at Okta's lifecycle management capabilities and Okta workflows. Let me know if you have any deeper discussion or if you want to have any deeper discussions around your use cases.
Excellent. Gurinder, thanks so much for sharing all these terrific insights with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure, Tom. And thanks to everybody who joined.
Yes, thanks for everyone who's joined us today. This concludes Automation in the New Normal, rapid onboarding and offboarding of workers, anywhere and on any device, an HMG Strategy webinar powered by Okta. On behalf of the entire team, thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you at an upcoming event.